Angela Williams could still remember the hum of private jets and polished marble floors under her feet, echoes from a childhood spent in boardrooms rather than playgrounds. Her father, the tech visionary Harold Williams, had showered her with opportunity and education, but never with humility. Over the years, she came to understand the extraordinary wealth she would one day inherit, a portfolio of patents, diverse investments, and quietly held real estate that made her the sole heiress to a fortune well into the billions. Yet as the media buzzed with speculation about the reclusive daughter of a tech mogul, Angela felt increasingly suffocated. In the months following her father's passing, Angela made an audacious decision to vanish from that privileged orbit and experience life from a vantage point where she would not be recognized or revered. She set out to find work as if she were any ordinary individual applying for a modest job. No references to her father, no mention of her trust funds. And so it came to pass that Angela found herself in Beverly Hills, interviewing for a housekeeping position at the palatial estate of one Richard Beaumont, a once powerful businessman with a rumoured financial empire now teetering on the brink. Angela's first day at the mansion was both intimidating and liberating. The estate, a sprawling testament to old Hollywood glamour, featured acres of manicured lawns, a curved driveway lined with sculpted hedges, and a fountain at its centre that sparkled under the California sun. At the front doors, tall, ornate, and always attended, Angela introduced herself simply as Angela Williams, with no further explanation. She noticed the staff rarely asked about backgrounds, especially not in a world where workers came and went. Within the first week, she had learned that Mr. Beaumont and his wife Elena were a study in contrasts. Elena was stylish to the point of opulence, parading through the mansion in designer dresses and diamonds that caught every flicker of light. She hosted lavish parties, charity galas, and private dinners, all while casting disdainful glances at those she deemed beneath her. Richard Beaumont, on the other hand, kept to his study for hours on end. He was older than Elena by nearly 15 years, stooped under the weight of deals gone sour and urgent calls with bankers, demanding collateral. The staff, a rotating mix of maids, housekeepers, valets, and security, worked tirelessly to uphold the illusion of success within the Beaumont household. Angela was just another cog in that machine, wearing a black and white uniform and sensible shoes, her hair pulled back neatly to avoid standing out. She deliberately kept her interactions with the owners to a minimum, hoping to observe and learn. One crisp morning, she was polishing the silver in the large formal dining room, an opulent space with tall windows draped in velvet. A delicate chandelier cast fractal rainbows on the polished table. She heard footsteps echo behind her, sharp, purposeful. "Angela," a voice called. She turned to see Eleanor Beaumont, standing there, her expression one of well-practiced contempt. "If you must linger in here, do wipe down the baseboards as well. We can't have the place look dusty for tonight's party." Elena's tone felt like a jab, but Angela merely nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Beaumont, of course." Elena's haughty gaze raked over Angela's uniform. "And fix your collar. It's crooked." With that, she left the room, high heels clicking resolutely across the marble floor. Angela exhaled slowly. She wondered if Elena had any inkling that the woman she berated was someone who could, in theory, buy and sell the entire estate. She felt a flicker of anger, but also a pang of empathy. Elena, it seemed, was under her own kind of stress. Word among the staff was that the Beaumont finances were precarious at best. Mr. Beaumont's once thriving businesses had stagnated, and rumours floated that he had borrowed heavily against the mansion. Perhaps that explains the tension, Angela thought, placing the last polished spoon in line. They're living a life they can no longer afford. Days turned into weeks, and Angela found an unexpected sense of camaraderie with some of the other staff members, particularly a fellow housekeeper named Cassidy. Cassidy was in her late 20s, with an easy laugh and a knack for story-swapping during break times. She, like Angela, had arrived not long ago, albeit without any hidden fortune. Cassidy was saving up for night classes in interior design, hoping to break out of housekeeping someday. "You're too quiet," Cassidy teased one afternoon as the two folded laundry in a spacious basement room where the hum of industrial washers set the rhythm. "It's like you're always watching, always listening, but never saying much." Angela smiled. "I'm just absorbing my surroundings." "Absorbing, huh?" Cassidy quirked a brow. "You're probably the smartest person in this entire mansion. I can feel it. One day you'll write some big exposé about the rich people who stomp all over us." Angela laughed softly. "I'm no reporter, trust me, but I do have a habit of taking notes." Cassidy shrugged. "Well, if you ever decide to leap out of here, remember me when you're big and famous." They shared a look that was half joke, half sincerity. Angela appreciated Cassidy's warm spirit and realized that she, too, missed having genuine friendships. Beneath the hush of this place, she found moments of real connection with the staff, people who were ignored by the upper echelons, but who supported one another with earnest humanity. Late one evening, after the day's work was done, Angela retreated to her small, modest room on the mansion's lower level. Tucked away behind the kitchens, it lacked any grandeur, just a twin bed, a narrow desk, and a closet. Once she locked the door, she let out a long breath and opened her laptop, an older model that bore no external signs of wealth. The moment she powered it on, she connected to an encrypted VPN and logged into her personal finance portal. She scanned the numbers. Various holdings, trusts, and shell companies. Her father's empire was intact, appreciating even, under the management of Miss Porter, an old friend of her father's, who served as Angela's financial advisor. Occasionally, Miss Porter sent coded messages, inquiring if Angela was truly content, living in anonymity, and if she needed any assistance. Angela typed a short reply. "I'm safe, learning a lot. No changes needed." Then she closed the laptop and buried it under a stack of neatly folded uniforms in her dresser. The next morning, an undercurrent of excitement ran through the mansion. Elena Beaumont was hosting a charity auction to benefit some foundation or another, one that Angela strongly suspected was more about appearances than altruism. Late into the afternoon, trucks carrying sculptures, art pieces, and decorative props arrived, filling the once spacious foyer with an assortment of valuable items on display. Angela was assigned to help arrange them, working under Elena's sharp supervision. "Move that painting to the left," Elena insisted, pointing at a massive canvas leaning against the wall. Angela did as told, adjusting the piece until Elena gave a curt nod. "And watch it," Elena added, voice dripping with condescension. "That painting is worth more than your entire year's salary." Angela nodded silently, thinking, "If only you knew what I could buy." But she said nothing, reminding herself that this was exactly why she had chosen this life, to witness and understand how people treated those they believed to be powerless. Evening fell, and the mansion bloomed with activity. Guests arrived in designer gowns and tuxedos, greeting each other with air kisses and compliments that sounded rehearsed. Servers in crisp white jackets circulated with trays of champagne. A string quartet filled the expansive hall with classical music, creating an ambiance of refined elegance. Angela and Cassidy drifted between the throng, ensuring tables stayed clean, glasses remained full, and no guest went unattended. Every now and then, Angela overheard snippets of conversation that revealed the precarious state of the Beaumont finances. "I heard Richard's got one foot in the grave, financially speaking. Can you believe they're still throwing these lavish parties when the rumour is the mansion's mortgaged to the hilt? My guess is they're hoping to attract a big investor tonight." It all felt reminiscent of a house of cards waiting for one strong gust of wind. And as the night went on, Angela found herself in the orbit of Richard Beaumont himself. He stood near a bar set up at one corner of the hall, swirling a glass of whiskey. His expression was distant, as though he were present, in body, but miles away in thought. She approached to collect empty glasses, and he acknowledged her with a nod, something he seldom did with staff. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Busy night, isn't it?" His voice carried exhaustion, not arrogance. Angela nodded. "Yes, sir. Everyone's enjoying the event, it seems." Richard's gaze drifted across the hall. "They'd better be. I need this to go well, very well, or we're finished." She didn't know whether to respond, so she stayed silent. He sipped his whiskey, then frowned. "I'm sorry. You're just here to do your job, not listen to me gripe. What's your name again?" "Angela Williams," she answered, her heart skipping a beat. She seldom shared her last name with people in the mansion, hoping no one would connect the dots, but Williams was common enough that few batted an eye. "Right, Angela," he repeated, as though trying to memorize it. Then he waved a tired hand, dismissing her to continue her duties. By the end of the auction, a decent sum of money had been raised. Elena sparkled with triumph, taking photos with donors and claiming all sorts of philanthropic zeal. Angela, however, noticed the anxious murmur between Richard and a certain Mr. Patel, an investment banker who had once done deals with Angela's father. From what she could gather, the auction's proceeds, though respectable, were not close to the kind of infusion the Beaumonts truly needed. Back in her room that night, Angela found herself torn. She had the resources to make a difference. She could step in quietly, perhaps through a shell company or a blind trust, to shore up Richard's sinking finances, but that meant interfering in a direct and potentially traceable way, risking her anonymity. Was it worth it? She decided to seek Ms. Porter's advice. In a coded email, she outlined the situation. Close friend's father in financial trouble, considering discreet assistance, minimal exposure. The next morning, Ms. Porter's reply was waiting. Understood. Transfer feasible with strict NDAs and layered shell entities. Risk of partial exposure, manage carefully. Angela felt her pulse quicken. The fact that she was even entertaining this idea spoke to how much her perspective had shifted since stepping into the mansion. She had seen glimmers of decency in Richard Beaumont, an aging magnate who perhaps once had grand ambitions but found himself drowning in complexities. She empathized with the staff who, if the mansion folded, might lose their jobs and stability. And yes, she even felt a reluctant pity for Eleanor, who seemed to be clinging to glamour to mask deeper fears. Within the next week, Angela put the wheels in motion. She worked on her battered laptop, funneling a sum of money, enough to temporarily alleviate some pressing debts, through an anonymous corporate entity. To the outside world, it would look like a prospective investor took a small stake in Beaumont's ventures. The terms were charitable, far better than Richard would get from any bank or venture capitalist, but not so generous as to raise immediate suspicions. A few days after the transaction, the atmosphere in the mansion changed noticeably. There was talk of a new investor stepping in, giving Richard enough of a financial cushion to fend off foreclosure. The staff whispered about the unexpected reprieve, while Richard looked less haggard, a mild glow of relief replacing the worry lines on his face. Yet Eleanor remained as sharp-tongued as ever. One afternoon, She berated Angela for accidentally scuffing a marble step with the cleaning cart. "Do you have any idea what these floors cost to maintain? I swear, good help is so hard to find," she hissed. Angela apologized, biting back any retort. That night, Angela confided in Cassidy more than she ever had. In the staff lounge, a small room with a worn couch, a TV usually set to the local news, and a vending machine, she let a few details slip. "Do you think they'll manage to keep the place?" Cassidy asked, stretching her arms after a long shift. Angela hesitated. "I think so. Word is they got some new backing." "Really? That's great. Maybe we won't all be out on the street." Cassidy paused, giving Angela a curious look. "You know a lot more about what's going on behind the scenes than you let on." Angela shrugged. "I keep my ears open." Cassidy studied her, then shook her head with a laugh. "You're a mystery, Angie." In the following weeks, the mystery investor breathed fresh life into Beaumont's affairs. Servants no longer feared missing paychecks, and the mansion's endless parade of dinner parties found renewed momentum. An air of possibility replaced the previous tension. Angela carried on with her housekeeping duties, trying to maintain her anonymity. But she soon realized that people were starting to talk about who this anonymous benefactor might be, about how funds had moved so suddenly, about whether Richard's luck would hold. Richard, for his part, was desperate to uncover the source of his salvation. He made discreet inquiries among his old associates. He called Mr. Patel, who knew many financial circles, and demanded some answers. But the information simply wasn't there. Every lead pointed to a labyrinth of shell corporations. Ironically, the more Richard searched, the more he saw the subtle improvements in the day-to-day operations of his own household, thanks in part to Angela's suggestions whispered quietly to Cassidy or to the new head of the housekeeping staff. Simple, cost-effective changes, such as negotiating better prices with local suppliers or implementing energy-saving measures, began to reflect in the monthly expense reports. One day, Mr. Beaumont unexpectedly stopped Angela in the hallway as she was carting fresh linens to the upstairs guest suites. "Angela," he said, sounding hesitant, "may I have a word with you in my study?" Her heart rate soared. She followed him into a space dominated by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a gleaming mahogany desk, and walls hung with framed awards from Richard's glory days in business. He gestured for her to close the door, then walked behind his desk. "Has anyone, any of the staff, mentioned anything about an outsider investing in my holdings?" he asked, folding his arms. Angela composed her face into polite curiosity. "I've heard the rumours that someone helped with funding, sir, but I don't know much else." Richard exhaled sharply. "That's all I've been able to find out too. Whoever they are, they're well hidden. But they've saved me from ruin." Angela nodded, saying nothing. His gaze narrowed slightly, as though searching her features for a clue. "You're more observant than most around here, Angela. If you hear anything at all, let me know." "I will, sir," she replied softly, then excused herself. She sensed his suspicion lingering in the room. It was as if, on some subconscious level, he recognized that the quiet housekeeper might be more than she appeared. But to consider that she could be a billionaire in disguise was too outlandish a leap for him to make. Amid these subtle undercurrents, the mansion prepared for yet another grand event, a black tie gala celebrating the turnaround of Beaumont Enterprises. The official reason was to thank supporters, but everyone knew it was a victory lap for Richard to showcase that he was not, in fact, finished. High-profile guests, from celebrities to business moguls, were invited. The staff was abuzz with the scale of the preparations. For Angela, the night began as usual, setting up centerpieces, ensuring the cutlery gleamed and adjusting the seating charts as Eleanor barked last-minute changes. Cassidy worked alongside her, occasionally exchanging amused eye rolls at Elena's imperious tone. When guests arrived, an orchestra played in the foyer, the gentle hum of polite conversation blending with the tinkling of crystal. Angela circled the hall with a silver tray of champagne flutes, offering them to luminaries who barely made eye contact. She recognized a few old faces. Some were wealthy associates of her late father, though none recognized her in the dim light, clad in a simple uniform, with her hair pulled back. Then, near the foot of the sweeping staircase, she spotted Mr. Patel. He was a man she had seen at numerous tech gatherings in her father's heyday. Angela's stomach tensed. If anyone could connect the dots, it would be him. She pressed herself back toward the wall, trying to remain inconspicuous, but before long, Mr. Patel locked eyes with her. He lifted a finger, beckoning her over. Heart pounding, Angela approached, forcing a neutral smile. "Wait a moment," Mr. Patel said, squinting slightly. "You look familiar." Angela's pulse throbbed. I'm just one of the housekeepers, sir. Can I get you a drink?" He seemed puzzled, as if sorting through memories. But then a guest called for his attention, and he turned away, leaving Angela exhaling in relief. She retreated to the butler's pantry, where Cassidy noticed her pale expression. "You okay?" Cassidy asked, concern evident. Angela nodded quickly. "Just startled. Thought I recognized someone." "Old friend?" Cassidy teased. "Not exactly." Despite the close call, the evening progressed smoothly, for a while. Speeches were made, music soared, and everyone clapped politely, celebrating the new dawn of Beaumont Enterprises. Yet beneath the surface, tensions still simmered. Eleanor had been drinking more than usual, leaning into her liquid courage to project an air of carefree opulence. By the time dinner was served, she was stumbling from table to table, crowing about how she and her husband had resurrected their fortunes through sheer genius. In one particularly unfortunate encounter, Elena cornered Mr. Patel and a small group of guests, slurring about how she deserved praise for saving the business. It was clear she was fishing for credit, desperate to maintain a sense of relevance and power. Across the room, Richard Beaumont rubbed his temples, clearly embarrassed. That's when Mr. Patel, now exasperated, made a pointed remark. "Your new investor is the real hero here, Eleanor. Perhaps you should raise a toast to them, whoever they are." Elena's face darkened. "We'll find out who they are soon enough," she declared loudly. "And when we do, I'll be sure to thank them personally." Angela observed this scene with growing unease. She knew that if Eleanor put significant resources into uncovering the investor's identity, it was only a matter of time before she stumbled upon the truth. The next day, the staff was abuzz with the aftermath of the gala. Cassidy confided in Angela that rumours were flying about Elena hiring a private investigator. The idea was to trace the shell companies and unmask the benefactor. "What will that mean for you?" Cassidy whispered, not realising the question's deeper resonance. Angela managed a small smile. "Let's hope it's just a rumour. Otherwise, it might shake things up." And indeed, Eleanor was not a woman who let things lie. Over the next week, the household felt the presence of new faces, business types in suits, conferring in hushed tones. They studied documents in Richard's study and made calls from the library phone line. Angela kept her head down, but her nerves frayed. Every day she risked exposure, and she didn't know what the fallout might look like. Public scandal, betrayal, or even legal complications for meddling in Beaumont finances. Meanwhile, Cassidy grew curious about Angela's constant unease. One evening, after they'd finished cleaning up the aftermath of a smaller dinner party, Cassidy confronted her in the staff lounge. "I know something's up," Cassidy said gently. "You're a sweet person, but you carry yourself like someone with a secret. I can't figure it out. Are you in trouble?" Angela weighed her response carefully. Cassidy had been a genuine friend, and Angela hated lying to her. But revealing everything could put Cassidy in an awkward or even dangerous position. "There are some things I can't talk about," Angela said at length. "But I promise I'm not hurting anyone. Actually, I'm trying to help." Cassidy studied her face, then nodded. "I won't push you, but I'm here if you need me." That night, Angela decided enough was enough. She drafted a secure message to Miss Porter, instructing her to finalize certain legal protections. If she was outed, at least her philanthropic actions would remain shielded, and she'd avoid massive scandal. Days later, a confrontation brewed that changed everything. Eleanor had apparently found a clue, some financial breadcrumb, that pointed her to Ms. Porter's involvement. She cornered Angela in the hallway, near a cluster of potted palms that lined the foyer. "You!" Elena hissed, her eyes flashing. "You were snooping around the study the other day. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Angela maintained a calm facade. "I only ever enter the study to dust and tidy, Mrs. Beaumont." "Cut the act," Eleanor snarled, then lowered her voice. "My investigators said there's a line connecting certain investments to a Williams Holdings. That's your name, isn't it? Williams?" Angela felt her stomach drop. "There must be many families named Williams, ma'am. It doesn't mean—" "Stop lying!" Eleanor's voice rose, echoing slightly in the foyer. A few staff members passed by, glancing nervously. "I don't believe in coincidences. You show up out of nowhere, and then we get this mysterious investor pumping money into our accounts. Who are you, really?" At that moment, Richard Beaumont, hearing the commotion, arrived with a look of alarm. "Elena, what on earth?" Elena pointed at Angela as if she were a criminal. "She's behind the shell companies, Richard. She's been meddling in our affairs." Angela's mouth went dry. She scrambled for a defense. I think you must be mistaken." Eleanor's eyes flashed with triumph. "Oh, I have evidence. A partial paper trail linking a corporate trust to the name Angela W. Porter, or something like that. This can't be a coincidence." She turned to her husband. "She's not just a housekeeper, Richard. She's involved, and I want answers." Richard looked from Eleanor to Angela, confusion etched on his face. "Angela, is this true?" Before Angela could speak, Eleanor pressed on. "Do you realize what this means? She's been spying on us. Or maybe she's using us. For all we know, she could own half of your business by now." Angela sensed there was no easy way out. She shot a pleading glance at Cassidy, who had appeared at the edge of the foyer, watching with wide, anxious eyes. The entire staff seemed to freeze, witnessing the standoff. Finally, Angela squared her shoulders. "Yes," she said softly. "I've been helping financially through a discreet channel." The admission sparked an immediate reaction. Elena's mouth twisted into fury, while Richard's eyes widened. "Helping?" he repeated, voice trembling. Angela nodded. "My name is Angela Williams. My father was Harold Williams, the tech entrepreneur. I inherited more wealth than I ever wanted. After he passed, I chose to step away from that life, to see the world from a different perspective. I ended up here." She swallowed hard. "When I saw how dire things were, I couldn't stand by and watch it all fall apart." The foyer fell silent as staff members exchanged stunned glances. Eleanor looked ready to explode, while Richard appeared too shocked to speak. Finally, he said, "Harold Williams was your father. The Harold Williams?" Angela nodded. Yes. The disbelief rippled through the mansion. Even Cassidy stood there, her hand clapped over her mouth. No one had expected the quiet, unassuming housekeeper to be an heiress who had personally saved Beaumont Enterprises from financial ruin. Eleanor recovered first, her voice laced with scorn. "So you toyed with us, played the part of a housekeeper just to amuse yourself, to watch us squirm?" Angela's eyes brimmed with a mix of guilt and resolve. "It was never about mocking anyone. I wanted to understand how people lived without wealth as a shield. I've seen kindness among the staff that's genuine and real, something I rarely encountered in my old life. But when I realized this place was on the brink of collapse, I stepped in." She turned to Richard. "I'm sorry if that feels like a breach of trust, but I had to help." Richard's face softened. He looked torn between gratitude and betrayal. "Your money. It saved us." Elena, however, was far from grateful. "This is outrageous," she muttered. "We could have handled things ourselves. We didn't need charity from you." "Enough, Eleanor," Richard snapped, surprising everyone. Then he faced Angela again. I don't know what to say." Angela offered a small, tentative smile. "It's all right. I didn't want anything in return. But I suppose the secret's out now." In the coming days, the mansion buzzed with aftershocks. Some staff were in awe, others felt uneasy, worrying about job security. Cassidy sought Angela out in private, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. "I thought we were friends." Angela lowered her head. "We are. I didn't want to put you in a tough spot. The fewer people who knew, the safer it was, both for you and for my anonymity." Cassidy's initial hurt gave way to understanding. "I guess I can see that. You're still the same Angela, though, right?" "Always," Angela said, pulling Cassidy into a hug. Richard Beaumont requested a private meeting with Angela in his study, the very room where he had once confided his fears to her. She entered with a calm resolve, not wearing her housekeeping uniform, but a simple blouse and trousers. Richard stood by the window, gazing out at the gardens. "You've given us a second chance, Angela. It's not lost on me that we've treated you like just another employee." Angela approached quietly. "I never expected special treatment, Mr. Beaumont. I wanted to blend in, to be invisible." He exhaled. "Invisible or not, you changed our fate. My business, my entire legacy, could have crumbled without your intervention." He paused, turning to meet her gaze. "Elena might not admit it, but she owes you too." Angela recognized the sincerity in his voice. "I hope you can salvage things. You have some good people working here, staff who genuinely care." Richard nodded. "I see that now. And it's not just about the money. This entire experience has forced me to re-examine a lot of things. How we treat people, how we got here." They spoke for an hour discussing finances and future plans. Richard admitted he was willing to repay Angela's investment under more standard terms once the company stabilized. Angela, for her part, assured him that was not her top priority, so long as the staff remained secure and basic fairness was restored. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the mansion transformed. Elena, though still cold toward Angela, refrained from overt hostility, possibly out of fear of losing the family's benefactor. Richard began implementing new policies for staff welfare. Health benefits, fair wages, and better working conditions. Angela's behind-the-scenes suggestions, once whispered to Cassidy, were now discussed openly with Richard. Eventually, the day came when Angela decided it was time to move on. She had seen enough. She had done what she could. On her last morning at the mansion, she packed her modest belongings into a small suitcase. Cassidy came to her room, tears in her eyes again. "I'll miss you," Cassidy said softly. "What will you do now?" Angela placed a hand gently on her friend's shoulder. "I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I'll travel, or maybe I'll focus on philanthropic projects more openly, but I promise I'll keep in touch." They embraced, and Angela felt the gravity of the connections she had formed here, connections based on genuine human bonds, not money or status. Richard Beaumont insisted on personally seeing Angela off at the front doors. She stepped outside into the warm California sunshine, the fountain's gentle spray shimmering at the end of the driveway. "You've taught us a lot," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "More than you know." Angela smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "I learned plenty too. Thank you for letting me be part of your world." Then, with a final wave, she left the estate. She walked down the long driveway, a single suitcase rolling behind her. No chauffeur, no limousine, just Angela Williams, exactly as she had arrived. But inside her, everything felt different. She now understood how easily one could be dismissed when stripped of recognizable power or wealth. She had witnessed genuine compassion among those who had little, and she had glimpsed desperation among those who had once possessed everything. Days became weeks, and Angela settled into a quieter routine in a modest apartment across town. She began working with Ms. Porter to set up charitable initiatives aimed at helping workers who found themselves trapped in precarious job situations: nannies, housekeepers, service staff. On the news, she occasionally heard updates of Beaumont Enterprises. The company was stabilizing under Richard's renewed leadership. Gossip columns reported that Elena had become less ostentatious, at least publicly. One evening, Angela opened an envelope that arrived in her mail. Inside was a handwritten letter from Cassidy. It told of the improvements in the mansion, the pay raises, the general sense of well-being that had replaced dread. Cassidy thanked Angela once more for being a friend and for making a difference, even if it was all done in secret. Angela folded the letter carefully, eyes misting. It felt good to know her efforts mattered. In truth, she'd never sought gratitude, but receiving it from someone she cared about filled her with a quiet satisfaction. Stepping out onto her small balcony, she let the cool night air wash over her. Far in the distance, the lights of the city twinkled. Somewhere amidst those lights stood the mansion she once helped save. She imagined the staff bustling about, the grand halls lit by chandeliers, the soft hum of evening routines. Perhaps there was a level of peace there now, a gentler atmosphere, a new respect for the dignity of every person who walked through its doors. She reflected on her father's legacy, a fortune meant to create innovation and possibility. In her own way, she had honoured that legacy by using it not just for profit, but to uplift. Her father had always told her, money can be a wall that separates you from people, or it can be a tool that connects and empowers. The choice is yours. A sense of resolution settled in Angela's heart. She had lived both sides of the divide, understanding the weight of wealth and the grace in humility. Tomorrow, she would meet with Miss Porter again to finalize a broader philanthropic strategy, one that might extend beyond just the Beaumonts. There was a world of need, and Angela Williams, once a hidden billionaire, once a simple housekeeper, was ready to rise to that challenge. Somewhere in the night, a single star shot across the sky, a silent promise that for those willing to look deeper, illumination was always possible. Angela turned away from the balcony, stepped back into her apartment, and quietly closed the door on one chapter of her life, ready to open the next with a steady, hopeful heart.